Hey guys, in this video I want to do something a little more casual. To be honest, I just wanted to draw something for myself. But as I was drawing, I started to think about a concept that's been floating around in my mind for a while now. And I think it's a really important question to ask yourself, because if you do start thinking about it, it could potentially cut off years from your art journey and help you break through plateaus and get through being stuck. So there's a lot to unpack here. Let's jump into it. So if you've been watching my recent videos, you'll know that I've been doing a Learn to Draw in Procreate series. And that's the reason why I started to think about this optimal order of learning to draw. You know, most of us are hobbyist artists. We don't really think about our learning journey. We just go about making art because it's fun and we just follow what inspires us. And that was me for most of my life until I had to create this series. And I thought to myself, I want to make something that helps someone learn to draw from complete scratch. And I wanted each video to build on the previous. So I had to think a lot about what knowledge do you guys have at a certain point in your journey, and what would you need to learn next. And this became a really personal process for myself because I started to look at my own journey. Now, I came up with my own creative roadmap that I think makes sense for anyone that wants to learn to draw. I'll put it up here on the screen, and I think it should make sense to most people. You might argue that certain things should be in a different order, but if you have your own roadmap or you think the order should be different, you can create that for yourself, right? The key here is thinking about it and being able to target which things you need to learn, or at least being aware of it, right? But what I found really interesting about this, especially for me, was that I noticed that there was like two massive gatekeepers that kind of blocked me. And because of these gatekeepers, I spent years in certain stages in my journey. And at the time, I couldn't see it at all, So have a look at my roadmap, think about your own roadmap, and maybe if you're feeling stuck as an artist, there's a possibility that these next two gatekeepers that I'm going to explain to you could be applying to you as well. Speaking of roadmaps, I just want to update you guys on where I'm at with my own art. And if you watched the last two videos, you'll know that I'm using the sponsor of today's video, Skillshare, to level up my art. Previously, I did Mimi Chow's watercolor class and I painted this tree, but I struggled to control the brush strokes and they overlap quite a bit, you can see here. So I didn't really like that and I wanted to get a deeper understanding. And that's what I've been doing with Nathan Brown's Procreate watercolor masterclass. His class goes into detail about brush selection, blending, textures, and edge variety, so it's really helping me get a handle on the medium. And that's the great thing about Skillshare. There are so many classes, you can use them to learn the basics, fill in gaps in your creative roadmap, or solve really specific niche problems like mine, which was edge variety in watercolor painting. Skillshare has creative classes taught by world-class creatives like professional illustrators, renowned graphic designers, and successful entrepreneurs. It's the best place to learn a creative skill or pick up a new hobby. If you're looking to reconnect with your creativity and maybe avoid some brain rot, Skillshare is where humans come to learn from other humans. The first 500 people to use the link in the description below or scan this QR code will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Now, the first gatekeeper has to do with the earlier stages in my roadmap. So, at the start of my roadmap, I've got here construction drawing, then we've got dynamic drawing, then observational drawing. And this is all about, developing the coordination and line work skills and just mentally being able to construct things and draw things with line work, right? Now, growing up as an artist and learning art and learning how to draw, one thing I was taught was technical skill was really important. And it was really important to have that discipline of being accurate and capturing every single detail. I remember the mark of a real artist was being able to create a photorealistic portrait, and that was amazing, right? Everyone would say wow, how did you draw that? And all that other stuff like abstract drawing, interpretive drawing, minimalism, or even simplifying things down to cartoons, they were all considered less sophisticated, right? Realism was the top thing. And then I think another thing that kind of shaped me growing up was I did this class called technical drawing in high school, and it was drawing, but it was kind of more targeted towards architecture. And we would use one of those rotring drawing boards with a ruler and protractor, and we had to draw plan and elevation drawings. We would draw isometric drawings, and it was all about being really accurate, and your line work had to be perfect, right? And then also at the time, I was really active on online forums and stuff, and there was a lot of really hardcore traditionalists that were technical skill is really important and you need to focus really hard on that. And I get why people kind of focus on that because, they're trying to teach me and us good habits. And I'm not saying fundamentals aren't important, But what it did to me was it started to make me think that photorealism and more detail was the measure or the standard that I had to live up to. And so I would put so much effort into my drawings. I would spend a really long time, add lots of details, but eventually I started to realize that it didn't matter how much effort I put in or how much detail I put in, I wasn't improving. And when you draw from photo ref, like, it doesn't matter how disciplined you are, you won't be able to copy it one for one. I found myself instinctively knowing that I can only draw certain subjects. If the subject or the photo reference has too much detail or too much, random foliage and stuff like that, I just wouldn't be able to recreate it. And so that was kind of like the first limitation, or the first sense that I was hitting a plateau or a boundary. The other thing that was happening to me was that my drawings wall were really stiff. And what I'd hit up against, or what I call like the first gatekeeper, was actually photocopier syndrome. I think I've said this on this channel before, but the purpose of being an artist is not to become a photocopier. Instead, the true purpose is to interpret reality via your art and your personal style. And I think I knew about this a long time ago, but I think I dismissed it because I thought that that was a cop-out. I was like, people that say you're not supposed to become a photocopier are just saying that because they don't have the technical skill, they don't have the discipline to learn the fundamentals, and they're teaching you the wrong thing. But that's not true at all. Now looking back, I see that emphasis on fundamentals is important, but it doesn't mean photocopying is also the goal, and it doesn't mean that you need to sacrifice everything else at the altar of photocopying. The biggest example or breakthrough of this for me was when I was doing my sketches, I realized I could just interpret the details instead of drawing every single detail. Like here in this drawing, I'm not drawing every single stone one for one accurately from my reference. I'm not drawing every single branch or cherry blossom from this tree. I'm just loosely interpreting it and allowing that texture and that feeling of the reference photo that I'm drawing from come through. Having this aha moment or getting past this gatekeeper was just such a relief for me. And I don't know if everyone does experience this either, but it just felt so freeing, right? Like all of a sudden, the different types of reference photos or subjects that I could draw from life opened up infinitely, because now it wasn't about can I reproduce that detail in perfect one-to-one detail. It was more about can I interpret that detail in my own way. Now, the interesting thing about this gatekeeper or this aha moment is that it wasn't about effort. I wasn't working really hard to do studies or learning every single piece of anatomy in the human body. It wasn't about doing a more complex piece. This was like an intellectual concept that once learnt properly allowed me to see better. And I'm sure you've heard before that people say drawing and art is not about, the texture or the marks you're making on the paper, but it's about learning how to see. Okay, so Gatekeeper 2. Now, this is the big one, and it's actually, I would say it's been the thing that has most blocked me my entire adult artistic life. And you know how we all have these feelings as artists where we see other people's art and we think that art is amazing. Like, how do they do that? It must be talent, or they're just magically skilled. Like, because of this gatekeeper, I thought that I started to believe that about myself, like that I just didn't have the ability to level up anymore. And the crazy thing about that was that this is coming from a person that has believed my whole life that, I can improve, I can just learn, and with enough effort and skill, I can get better as an artist. And so that's just how big of a gatekeeper this was. It was so big that it broke that belief that I could still keep improving. And just to explain this a bit further, I feel like there's two ways to improve as an artist. You can either improve by working harder, more effort, more time spent on your artworks, more detail. And that was 90% of how I improved. But there is another way, and that's working smarter. And that kind of ties back to what I was saying before about how these gatekeepers are intellectual concepts that you need to see or be guided towards. But the other key thing about them is they need to be seen at the right moment and the right order in time. Like if you're at the right position in your creative journey, it'll make sense. But if you don't see it at the right moment, it won't make sense to you at all. So for me, Gatekeeper 2 was all about color. And I think I had a really bad introduction to color because I started painting color using Photoshop back in the 90s. Photoshop was all the craze, and I got my first Wacom tablet and I just wanted to color stuff. And at the time, everyone was using dodge and burn to color. And that's probably the worst introduction to coloring that one could ever have, but that's what I had. So I would, scan my line work into Photoshop, and then I would paint it with the airbrush, and then I would start using dodge and burn to add shadows and highlights to my work. And I was just so excited about drawing. Like, I didn't really think about it too hard. I just wanted to draw everything. And sure, I did look up some tutorials on color, oh, this is how you add shadows and highlights. And I did learn some basic concepts like, don't put black into your shadows because that makes them muddy. Use blues because it's more natural. But all these bits and pieces of information here and there were helpful, but eventually I hit a plateau and I just couldn't break through. And I think I stayed at this level for maybe 10 years, maybe even longer. I would say throughout most of my adult life, I've been at this level and I wasn't able to improve beyond that. And I think only in the last few years, I've started to see just underneath the tip of the iceberg. I've just been playing in the little tip of the iceberg, and there's actually all of this stuff underneath that I couldn't see before. And I was so frustrated with myself that I just started doing this exercise that I learned a long time ago, which was just to draw or paint a sphere and cubes in space and just try to get the lighting and the color right. And I didn't have a teacher or a tutorial that I was following. I was just really forcing myself to the extreme of my intuition, right? And I actually did a few versions of these, and I was just really frustrated to the point where I would just sit there looking at the sky thinking, how do I capture that beautiful glow of the sky? How do I capture sunset and afternoons and mornings? Why does every time I paint something, it just looks cartoony and flat? And now I like to say that I was looking at the sky because I was trying to study it and all this kind of stuff, but actually no, I was just dreaming really. I was just gazing off at the sky, looking at the clouds. And then that's when I kind of got the first hint. And I realized that the sky is really bright. And that sounds really dumb. It just sounds like a random comment that doesn't make any sense. But when I say it's really bright, I'm talking about brightness, right? And it was just this tiny aha moment that made me think, hang on, let me go back and look at all my other old artworks and let me look at the skies in all of them. And when I look back, I started to see it. I was like, all of my skies aren't bright enough. Yes, my skies are blue, but they're not bright. And there's a difference between the two. And so after starting to dig into this and repainting some of my old pieces, I started to realize that all along the gatekeeper for my color work was values. I needed to do value studies. I needed to understand the grayscale values underneath my artwork and the brightness of my artwork before I could, have any chance at being able to paint something in color that looks realistic and dynamic and really just with natural lighting. And so when I made this discovery, it was amazing, especially for someone at my age that has been an artist for so long. I didn't think that there were any more aha moments left for me to have. I didn't think that there was anything that would really excite me about art anymore. But this thing really opened up the rest of my art journey, and I couldn't believe it. And I felt really dumb, actually. When I thought about it, I'd known what values are. People have mentioned it to me in the past. I've read about it on forums, even as far back as when I was a teenager, but it just never connected with me. And that's what I was getting at before when I said that sometimes these pieces of knowledge, they need to come to you at the right time, at the right moment when you're really thinking or focused on that area. And that's why I feel like it's really important to ask this question of what is the optimal order for learning to draw, reflecting on what your creative roadmap is and looking at where the gaps are in that roadmap. And looking at my own journey, I just felt so motivated and inspired. And I just felt like creating this Learn to Draw and Procreate series was more important than ever. If I had this Learn to Draw series and this creative roadmap much earlier in my life, I would have leapfrogged so much further and I wouldn't be as stuck as I was today. Now, if any of this is resonating with you, or if you feel stuck as an artist, the chances are maybe the breakthrough doesn't come from harder work, but it comes from a concept or direction that you need to be pointed in. And I really encourage you to watch my Learn to Draw series here on this channel. So far there are 5 videos, and the next video coming up will be part 6. But I also want to say that these videos are just half of the story. For each public video that's here on my channel, there will also be a private video over on my Patreon where we apply the lessons from the public video in a practical tutorial. Now I know Patreon isn't for everyone, so I will be bundling all the content together and launching a Learn to Draw bundle that will drop in June 2026. There will be an introductory price that won't last, so if you want to get notified on that early pricing, just go to my website, the link will be up here on the screen, and just sign up your email and hit notify me. Okay, so thanks for listening to me ramble, guys. I'm really happy with how this sketch is turning out. This is an example of a sketch that I never would have attempted before in my accuracy and, discipline phase. Like dealing with all these cherry blossoms, I would have thought I would have had to draw every single one for one, but nope, I'm just letting myself be free, and I'm really loving this sketch. It's just been so much fun to draw. For those that have been following the series, thank you so much for sticking around. Part 6 will be out next month in April, and it's going to be about color, which is a huge subject, which is kind of why I've pushed the date for that a bit later. I just want to make sure that it is a really good finish or finale to the series and that you'll get something out of it. So make sure you're subscribed if you haven't already. Please turn on the notification bell so that you know when it drops. And I also want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of this video, Skillshare. Thank you so much for your support. And if you want to learn something that you can't find here on this channel, go check out Skillshare. There's a link in the description below. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.